David Reed had never seen so many ways to die in one room. The orientation hall of Academy Station Omega-7 stretched before him like a nightmare made real. Creatures from 100 worlds filled the benches, and every single one of them could kill him without breaking a sweat. The insectoid Ravathi clicked and hummed in their corner, their hive minds creating patterns of movement that hurt to watch. The massive Koltor sat in reinforced seats, their armored hides gleaming under the station lights. And then there were the Sherrick. David tried not to stare at them. The wolf-like predators took up an entire section, their razor claws scraping against metal as they moved. Their eyes glowed in the dim light, tracking every motion in the room. These were the creatures that had hunted across 3 star systems before joining the Galactic Coalition. These were apex predators born and bred, and humans had just been invited to train alongside them. David found an empty spot on a bench near the middle of the hall. Around him, species clustered together, staying with their own kind. It made sense. Why would a Koltor sit next to a Ravathi? Why would anyone sit next to a Sherrick? The young predators were unpredictable, everyone knew that. They had killed by accident before during simple training exercises. Someone sat down next to him. David turned slowly, carefully keeping his breathing steady. A Sherrick, smaller than the others, had taken the seat beside him. The creature's fur was dark gray with silver markings along its muzzle. Its ears were pinned back slightly, and its claws retracted as much as they could be. Young, David realized, maybe the equivalent of a teenager in Sherrick years. The other Sherrick across the room were watching. Some made low growling sounds. The young one beside David seemed to shrink a little, but it did not move away. David did what felt natural. He nodded once, a simple greeting, then turned his attention back to the front of the hall. He did not flinch. He did not move away. He just sat there like it was the most normal thing in the world to have an apex predator sitting inches away. The young Sherrick made a small sound, almost like surprise. At the front of the hall, the door sealed with a heavy thunk that echoed through the space. Instructor Call stepped onto the platform, his scaled skin reflecting the overhead lights. He was from one of the neutral species, one of the few races that had no stake in the various conflicts that plagued the galaxy. His face bore scars from decades of combat, and his eyes missed nothing. Those eyes swept across the room and stopped on David and the young Sherrick. For just a moment, Instructor Call's expression changed. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, or might have been a predator recognizing prey. "Welcome to Academy Station Omega-7, Call said, his voice amplified through the hall. "You are here because your species have proven themselves in combat. You are here because you represent the best your worlds have to offer. You are here to learn how to fight together." A ripple of movement went through the assembled students. Fighting together meant something different to each species. For the Ravathi, it meant perfect hive coordination. For the Koltor, it meant unstoppable strength and formation. For the Sherrick, it meant pack hunting. For humans, David thought, it meant something else entirely. "Your first exercise begins now," Kale continued. "You will be placed in teams of 2. You will face a 72-hour survival scenario in a hostile environment simulation. You will have limited supplies. You will face aggressive fauna. You will succeed or fail based on your ability to work with your partner." Another ripple, this time of unease. 72 hours was a long time to trust someone from another species. "Current seating arrangements will determine your partnerships," Kal said. The room erupted. Ravathi buzzed in agitation. Koltor bellowed protests. The Sherrick across the room stood, growling their disapproval. A Sherrick paired with anyone outside their species was unusual. A Sherrick paired with a human was unthinkable. David felt the young Sherrick beside him tense. The creature's claws extended slightly, scraping against the bench. It was preparing for rejection, David realized. It expected him to protest, to demand a different partner. Instead, David turned to face the Sherrick fully. He met those glowing eyes and spoke quietly, just loud enough to be heard over the chaos.
"I am David Reed. What do they call you?"
The Sherrick stared at him, confusion clear in its posture. "Riven," it said finally, the name coming out as a rumbling growl. "They call me Riven." "Nice to meet you, Riven," David said. He held out his hand, the human gesture of greeting. Riven looked at the hand like it might be a weapon. Slowly, carefully, it extended one clawed hand and touched David's palm. The claws did not pierce skin. The grip was gentle, controlled. "You do not fear me," Riven said. It was not quite a question. "Should I?" David asked. "Yes," Riven said simply. My kind are dangerous. I am dangerous. So am I, David said. Every species in this room is dangerous. That is why we are here. At the front of the hall, Instructor Call watched the exchange. His smile grew wider. He raised one hand and the room fell silent. The simulation begins in 1 hour. You will be transported to the drop zone with your partner and basic supplies. There are no do-overs. There are no second chances. Survive together or fail together. He paused, his eyes finding David and Riven again. Some of you think this pairing is a mistake. Some of you think certain species should not mix. You are about to learn why you are wrong. The doors at the back of the hall opened. Students began filing out, heading to the preparation areas. David stood and Riven stood with him. Around them, other students gave them a wide berth. The other Sherrick watched Riven with something that looked like disappointment or disgust. The humans in the group shot David confused glances. David ignored all of it. He looked at Riven and jerked his head toward the door. Come on, partner. We have a simulation to survive. Riven's ears perked forward, surprise evident in every line of its body. Then slowly it followed David toward the preparation area. Behind them, Instructor Call watched with satisfaction. He had sealed the room and made the assignments knowing exactly what would happen. Now he would see if the rumors about humans were true. He would see if they really could pack bond with anything, even apex predators. And if they could, everything the galaxy knew about cooperation was about to change. The simulation dropped them into hell. One moment David and Riven were standing in the transport bay, and the next they were falling through thick canopy into a jungle that smelled of rot and violence. David hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Riven landed beside him on all fours, claws digging into the soft earth. The supplies landed a second later, a small pack that contained basic rations, water purification tablets, and a single emergency beacon. That beacon was their way out when the 72 hours ended, if they were still alive to use it. Riven rose to its full height, nostrils flaring as it scented the air. Predators, it said, the word coming out as a low growl. Large ones, close. David pulled the pack onto his shoulders and scanned their surroundings. The jungle was dense, with visibility limited to maybe 20 feet in any direction. The sounds around them were constant, buzzing, clicking, rustling. Things lived here, things that would see them as either threat or food. We need high ground, David said. Somewhere we can see them coming. Riven looked at him, head tilted. You do not want to hunt them first? No, David said. We want to survive, not prove how tough we are. This seemed to confuse Riven. Among Sherrick, proving toughness was the same as survival. The weak died. The strong lived. That was the natural order. They moved through the jungle with Riven taking point. The young Sherrick's senses were sharper than anything human technology could replicate. It could hear heartbeats from 50 yards away, could smell blood on the wind, could sense vibrations in the ground that warned of approaching danger. David watched and learned. He noted which plants Riven avoided, which directions made its ears flatten, which scents made it bare its teeth. Humans might not have enhanced senses, but they had pattern recognition. They had the ability to learn. 3 hours into the simulation, they found a rocky outcropping with a shallow cave. It was defensible with good sightlines. David immediately set to work gathering materials for a fire. Riven watched him with growing confusion. Fire will attract predators, it said. Fire will keep some predators away, David countered. And we need to purify water. Can you drink from the streams here without getting sick? Riven considered this. No, it admitted. The water here smells wrong. Then we need fire, David said. He pulled out the rations and split them evenly, offering half to Riven. The Sherrick stared at the offered food like it was a trick. You share your food with me? We are partners, David said simply. Partners share. Sherrick do not share, Riven said slowly. The strong eat first. The weak eat what remains, if anything remains. David met those glowing eyes steadily. Humans are different. We survive because we take care of each other, not because we fight each other. Riven took the rations carefully, still watching David for signs of deception. When none came, it ate slowly, thoughtfully. This human made no sense by Sherrick standards. It should be trying to establish dominance. It should be hoarding resources. Instead, it shared equally and acted like they were equals. Night fell fast in the simulation. The jungle became a chorus of screams and howls. Things moved in the darkness. Things with too many legs or too many teeth. David kept the fire burning while Riven stood watch, its night vision perfect in the blackness. Why did they reject you? David asked quietly. The other Sharek. I saw how they looked at you. Riven was silent for a long moment. I am weak, it said finally. I hesitated during a hunt. I let prey escape because it was injured and suffering. My pack saw this as failure. They sent me here to either become strong or die trying. David poked at the fire, sending sparks into the night air. That does not sound weak to me. That sounds like compassion. Compassion is weakness, Riven said, repeating what was clearly a lesson learned young. Compassion is strength, David countered. It means you can see beyond yourself. It means you can think about others. That is not weakness, Riven. That is evolution. Before Riven could respond, something large moved in the darkness beyond the firelight. David saw eyes reflecting the flames, multiple sets of them circling their position. Riven saw them too and moved to put itself between David and the approaching threat. The creatures attacked without warning. They were reptilian, low to the ground with jaws that could bite through bone. There were 4 of them, working in coordinated strikes. One went for David while the others focused on Riven. David rolled away from snapping jaws, grabbing a burning branch from the fire and thrusting it at the creature's face. The thing recoiled, hissing, and David scrambled backward. But the creature was faster, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Riven hit it like a meteor. The young Sharek slammed into the reptile with all its weight, claws raking across scaled hide. The creature screamed and tried to shake Riven off, but the Sharek held on with savage determination. The other 3 reptiles turned to help their packmate, leaving David momentarily forgotten. David did not waste the opportunity. He grabbed a sharp rock and threw it at the nearest creature, hitting it in the eye. The thing shrieked and turned on him, but David was already moving, leading it away from Riven. The fight was brutal and fast. Riven killed one reptile outright, its claws finding the soft tissue beneath the creature's jaw. David managed to drive another back with fire and stones, keeping it at bay until Riven could finish the other 2. When the last reptile fled into the darkness, both of them were breathing hard. Riven was bleeding from a gash across its shoulder. David saw it immediately and moved without thinking, pulling out the small medical kit from their supplies. Hold still, he said, approaching carefully. Riven tensed, instinct screaming at it to reject help, to hide weakness. I am fine, it growled. You are bleeding, David said. Let me help. Sharek, do not help the wounded, Riven said. The wounded slow the pack. They are left behind. David stopped, meeting Riven's eyes. I am not Sharek, and you are not slowing me down. You just saved my life. Let me return the favor. Slowly, Riven sat down and extended its injured shoulder. David worked carefully, cleaning the wound and applying the coagulant gel from the medical kit. His hands were steady, gentle. He treated Riven like it mattered, like its pain mattered. Why? Riven asked quietly. Why do you care if I am hurt? David finished bandaging the wound and sat back. Because you are my partner. Because humans do not leave people behind no matter what. We survive together or not at all. Riven stared at him, something shifting in its expression. Your species is strange. Maybe, David said, a small smile crossing his face. But we are still here, are we not? Humans are not the fastest or the strongest. We cannot see in the dark or track by scent. But we survive because we refuse to give up on each other. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the jungle settle around them. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled overhead, unfamiliar constellations in a simulated sky. I think I understand now, Riven said finally, why Instructor Kale paired us. He wanted to see if it was true. If what was true? David asked. That humans can make a pact with anyone, Riven said, even apex predators. David looked at the young Sharek, at the way it sat protectively between him and the darkness, at the wound it had taken defending him. Not a pack, he said gently. A friend. Riven's ears perked forward. The concept of friendship was alien to Sharek culture, but something in David's tone made it sound less like weakness and more like possibility. The remaining hours of the simulation passed in careful cooperation. They survived because they watched each other's backs. They survived because they shared resources and skills. They survived because one was willing to learn and the other was willing to teach. When the 72 hours ended and the extraction signal sounded, Instructor Call reviewed the footage. He watched a human treat a Sharek's wounds. He watched a Sharek defend a human without hesitation. He watched 2 beings from completely different worlds become something new. And he smiled because the rumors were true after all. 6 weeks into training, everything changed. David and Riven had become a fixture at the academy, an oddity that other students had slowly grown used to. They moved through the corridors together, studied together, ate together. The Shark, who had once been rejected by his own kind, now walked with confidence beside a human who treated him like family. Other students watched them with mixed reactions. Some found it fascinating. Others found it disturbing. The Ravathi hive minds calculated the odds of such a partnership lasting and found them statistically improbable. The Kultor simply did not understand what they were seeing, but it was working. Their test scores were among the highest in the class. Their combat simulations showed a level of coordination that surprised even Instructor Call. They covered each other's weaknesses and amplified each other's strengths. David's strategic thinking combined with Riven's physical prowess made them formidable. Not everyone was happy about it. Bront was a Kultor, massive even by his species standards. His armored hide was scarred from a dozen battles, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never truly been challenged. He watched David and Riven with growing resentment, seeing their success as an insult to the natural order. Kultor were strong. Humans were weak. That was how things should be. The combat exercise was supposed to be routine. Hand-to-hand sparring, controlled conditions, safety protocols in place. Students were paired randomly to practice fighting opponents from different species. It was meant to teach adaptability and respect for different combat styles. David drew Bront as his opponent. Riven immediately tensed when the pairing was announced. Its ears flattened and a low growl built in its chest. David put a hand on Riven's shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar between them. "It will be fine," he said quietly. "Just sparring." But when they entered the ring, David saw something in Bront's eyes that made him reconsider. This was not going to be just sparring. The instructor called for them to begin. Bront moved with deceptive speed for something so large. David dodged the first strike, using his smaller size to stay mobile. He had trained for this, had learned to fight opponents bigger and stronger than himself. Speed and intelligence over raw power. Then Bront broke protocol. Instead of pulling his strike, the Kultor put his full weight behind a blow aimed at David's chest. David saw it coming and twisted, but not fast enough. The impact sent him flying across the ring, ribs screaming in protest. He hit the floor hard and tasted blood. The instructor was shouting, calling for a stop, but Bront was not listening. He advanced on David, rage evident in every movement. "Weak," he snarled. "Humans are weak. You do not belong here." David tried to stand, but his ribs were damaged, possibly broken. He got to one knee as Bront reached for him, clearly intending to finish what he had started. Riven hit Bront like a lightning strike. The young Shark moved faster than David had ever seen it move. One moment it was outside the ring. The next it had Bront on the ground with claws at his throat. Riven's eyes were wild, feral. All the careful control stripped away by instinct. "Protect the pack. Destroy the threat. Riven, no." David shouted, forcing himself to stand despite the pain. "Stop," but Riven was beyond hearing. Its claws drew blood, and Bront roared in pain and fear. Other instructors rushed forward, trying to pull Riven off, but the Shark was in a full protective frenzy. Nothing would stop it except killing it or letting it kill Bront. David did the only thing he could think of. He moved forward, ignoring his damaged ribs, and put himself between Riven and Bront. He placed both hands on Riven's face, forcing the Shark to look at him instead of the Kultor. "Riven," he said, voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Look at me, I am okay. You saved me, but you need to stop now." Riven's eyes focused on David, recognition slowly returning. Its breathing was ragged and its whole body trembled with the effort of restraint. "He hurt you," it growled. "He tried to kill you." "I know," David said. "But if you kill him, they will take you away. And I need you here with me. Please, Riven, stand down." For a long moment, nothing moved. The entire training hall held its breath. Then slowly, Riven withdrew its claws from Bront's throat and stepped back. It stayed between David and the Kultor, protective but no longer actively violent. Bront scrambled away, blood streaming from the wounds on his neck. He would survive, but the fear in his eyes was new. He had thought himself the apex predator in the room. Riven had shown him otherwise. The review board convened within hours. David and Riven stood before a panel of senior instructors and academy officials. The charges were serious. Excessive force. Endangering another student. breaking combat protocols. They wanted both of them expelled. David stepped forward before anyone could speak. "This was my fault," he said clearly. The panel looked at him with surprise. Riven made a sound of protest, but David continued. "I knew Bront had issues with humans. I should have reported my concerns before the exercise. I should have been more prepared. Riven was acting on instinct, protecting a partner who was in danger." "The Sharek nearly killed a student," one of the panel members said coldly. "Such lack of control is unacceptable." "Lack of control?" David asked. Riven stopped when I asked. "A Sharek in full frenzy does not stop. They do not hesitate. But Riven trusted me enough to pull back. That is not lack of control. That is the highest level of trust and discipline." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I researched Sharek culture when we were first partnered. I learned that Riven was sent here because its pack considered it weak. Do you know why they thought that? Because Riven showed compassion. Because it hesitated to cause unnecessary suffering. Those same traits let it stop today when others of its kind would not have." The panel exchanged glances. One of them, an older instructor with graying skin, leaned forward. "You speak of trust and compassion as if they are military virtues. But this is a combat academy. We train warriors, not friends." "With respect," David said, "you are wrong. You train soldiers who will one day fight together in real battles. And in real battles, trust is the difference between life and death. Compassion is what keeps you fighting for the person next to you instead of just for yourself." Instructor Call stood from where he had been observing. "If I may," he said, addressing the panel, "this incident, while unfortunate, proves exactly what we have been testing. Human ability to form bonds across species lines is not just a curiosity. It is a tactical advantage." The panel leader looked at Kal with skepticism. "You planned this?" "Not this specifically," Kale admitted. "But I have been documenting Reed and Riven's partnership for weeks. They represent something new, something the Galactic Coalition desperately needs. Our forces are divided by species loyalty. We fight alongside each other, but rarely for each other. These two have shown that true integration is possible." He gestured to David and Riven. "Yes, Riven lost control, but it lost control protecting its partner, not out of mindless rage, and it regained control through trust, not force. That demonstrates evolution, not failure." The panel deliberated for what felt like hours. Finally, the leader spoke. "You will not be expelled. However, you will face consequences. You will be assigned to a special training program, one designed to test the limits of cross-species cooperation." David and Riven exchanged glances. "What kind of program?" David asked. Kale smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. "A deep space mission. Minimum crew, maximum danger. You will be joined by representatives from 4 other species, all of whom have their own conflicts and prejudices. You will have 1 month to either learn to work together or tear each other apart trying." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "This is not a punishment. This is an opportunity. Show the galaxy that what you have built can be replicated. Show them that the future of the Coalition depends on becoming more like you and less like what we have always been." David looked at Riven. The young Sharek looked back, and something passed between them without words. Understanding, trust, partnership. "We will do it," David said. "When do we leave?" 3 days, Carl said. "Choose carefully what you pack, and prepare yourselves. The others you will be working with are not going to be happy about this arrangement." As they left the hearing room, Riven spoke quietly. "You took responsibility for me. You could have let them blame me alone." "Partners do not abandon each other," David said simply. "You protected me in that ring. I protected you in that hearing. That is what it means to be a pack." Riven's ears perked forward. "A pack," it repeated, the word carrying new weight. "Yes, that is what we are." 3 days later, they boarded a ship bound for deep space with 5 strangers who would either become their crew or their executioners. Instructor Call watched them go with satisfaction. The real test was about to begin. The ship Horizon's Edge was not built for comfort. David stood in the cramped common area, taking stock of the crew he would be living with for the next month. 6 beings from 6 different worlds crammed into a vessel barely large enough for 3. The air recyclers hummed with strain, trying to balance atmospheric preferences that ranged from oxygen-rich to methane-tolerant. Riven stood close beside him, a familiar presence in this sea of hostility. Nella was Ravathi, her insectoid body a constant source of clicking and humming as her hive mind struggled with being isolated from the greater collective. She had been separated from her sisters for this mission, a torture for a species that thought in plural. Her multifaceted eyes tracked everything with paranoid intensity. Taurus was the Coulter representative, even larger than Bront, but with scars that spoke of actual combat rather than training exercises. He took up nearly a quarter of the available space and made no effort to accommodate anyone else. His opinion of humans was clear in every dismissive glance. Shen belonged to the Limari, a species of pure intellect housed in a fragile crystalline body. They communicated through light pulses and required a translation device to speak with others. Shen considered physical species beneath them, necessary tools but hardly equals. Kiv was perhaps the strangest of all. The aquatic being existed inside a mobility suit filled with water, their tentacled form visible through the transparent panels. Kiv's species had barely mastered space travel and were still adapting to life among air breathers. 6 species. 6 different ways of thinking. 6 different hierarchies all claiming superiority. The mission briefing was supposed to be simple. They would patrol a designated section of space, run system checks, and practice coordinating as a multi-species crew. It was meant to be routine, controlled, safe. On the 3rd day, the ship started dying. It began with small things: power fluctuations, navigation errors, communication static. David noticed them first, his human pattern recognition flagging anomalies that the others dismissed. But by the time everyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. The main drive went offline. Life support began failing, and the navigation computer cheerfully informed them that they were drifting toward a radiation belt that would cook them all within 48 hours. "This is sabotage," Shen declared, their lights pulsing angry red. "Someone has betrayed us." Immediately, the accusation started. Taurus blamed the Ravathi, saying hive minds could not be trusted. Nella blamed the Limari, claiming their crystalline bodies interfered with ship systems. Kiv blamed everyone, paranoid and isolated in their water suit. Riven growled low, a sound that cut through the arguing. "Fighting solves nothing. We need to fix the ship." "The Predator speaks sense," Taurus sneered.
How unexpected.
"Tell me, Sherrick, does your human teach you to use words before claws?" David stepped forward before Riven could respond. "Enough. We have 48 hours to live if we do nothing. We can spend that time blaming each other, or we can spend it surviving." "And why should we listen to you?" Taurus demanded. "You are human. You are weak. You bring nothing to this crew except your pet predator." David took a breath, fighting down anger. "Because I am the only one here who has actually worked successfully with someone from a different species. Riven and I survived simulations that killed other teams. We did it by trusting each other, not by fighting each other." He looked around at the assembled crew. "I know none of you want to be here. I know you all think your species is superior to the rest. But unless we work together right now, we all die together, and our deaths will prove that the people who sabotaged this ship were right." Nella clicked in agitation. "What do you mean, sabotaged?" David moved to the central console and pulled up the diagnostic logs. "Look at this. The failures are too coordinated. Someone programmed these malfunctions. Someone wants us to fail." Shen's lights flickered with interest. "Show me." For the next hour, David and Shen worked through the code while the others watched. The Limari's superior processing speed combined with David's intuition uncovered the truth. A hidden AI was actively sabotaging their systems, creating new problems faster than they could solve old ones. "This is a test," Nella said finally, understanding dawning. "They want to see if we tear each other apart." "Then we will not give them the satisfaction," Riven said. "We will survive despite them." Taurus snorted. "Easy words, but how? The AI is in every system. We cannot fight code with claws." David closed his eyes, thinking. Humans had survived for millennia by adapting, by finding solutions where none seemed to exist. His species was not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but they were stubborn and they refused to accept defeat. "We need to divide the work," he said finally. "Each of you has skills the others do not. We use those skills where they fit best." He turned to Taurus. "You are strong. The hull needs repairs that require moving heavy equipment. Can you do that?" Taurus hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. "Nella, you can process multiple data streams at once. We need someone to monitor all ship systems simultaneously while we work." Your hive mind training makes you perfect for that. The Ravathi clicked thoughtfully. I can try. Without my sisters, it will be difficult, but possible. Shen, you understand the code. Work with me to counter the AI's interference. The Limeri pulsed agreement. Kiv, some of the lower decks are flooded. Your suit will let you access areas the rest of us cannot reach. The aquatic being rippled with what might have been approval. And Riven, David said, turning to his partner, you keep us safe. If anything tries to stop us, you stop it first. For a moment, silence filled the ship. Then slowly, each crew member moved to their assigned task. It was not trust, not yet, but it was cooperation born of necessity. The hours that followed were brutal. Taurus wrestled with equipment 3 times his size, his armor dented and scratched. Nella pushed her mind to the breaking point, tracking dozens of systems without her hive to support her. Shen and David fought a digital war against an AI that seemed to anticipate their every move. And through it all, David did something the others had not expected. He coordinated. He remembered that Taurus needed high-protein nutrition after physical exertion and made sure someone brought food. He noticed when Nella's stress clicks became desperate and talked her through the panic of isolation. He reminded Shen to rest their crystalline core before it fractured from overuse. He took care of them, even when they had done nothing to deserve it. Riven watched all of this with growing understanding. This was what David had tried to explain in the jungle simulation. This was what humans did. They built packs not through dominance but through care. With 12 hours remaining, the AI made its final move. It offered them a choice through the ship's communication system. Sacrifice one crew member to save the others. Choose now or all perish. The crew gathered in the common area, exhausted and desperate. The AI's logic was cruel but clear. Eject one being into space and the ship would have enough power to restart the drive. Everyone lives except the sacrifice. Species hierarchies immediately reasserted themselves. Each member argued why they were essential, why someone else should be chosen. Old prejudices surfaced with renewed strength. David listened to it all, then spoke quietly. No. Everyone turned to look at him. No sacrifice, David said firmly. We find another way or we go together. That is illogical, Shen pulsed. 1 death versus 6 deaths. The mathematics are simple. Humans have a saying, David said. No one left behind. I will not abandon any of you even to save myself. If we die as a crew. Riven stood beside him. I agree with David. We survive together. Nella clicked softly. My hive would call this foolish, but my hive is not here, and this human has shown me more care in days than my sisters have in years. She turned her multifaceted eyes to the others. I will not choose a sacrifice either. One by one, the others agreed. Taurus grudgingly. Shen logically, calculating that unified effort might find a solution. Kiv silently, rippling agreement through their suit. United, they attacked the problem from all angles. 6 minds, 6 skill sets working not as separate species but as a single crew. The AI had been programmed to divide them, to exploit their differences. It had not been programmed for what happened when they chose unity. With minutes to spare, they found the solution. Not by defeating the AI, but by showing it something it could not process. Genuine cooperation across species lines. Selfless action. Willingness to sacrifice together rather than sacrifice each other. The AI's logic circuits could not resolve the paradox. It shut down in a recursive loop and the ship's systems came back online. As they limped back toward the academy, battered but alive, the crew sat together in exhausted silence. They had survived, but more than that, they had changed. Instructor Call reviewed the mission logs with satisfaction. The real test had not been survival. It had been seeing if they could become something more than the sum of their species. They had passed, and the galaxy was watching. Recovery took 3 days after they docked at Academy Station Omega 7. The crew of Horizon's Edge had become minor celebrities. Word spread quickly through the Academy about the mission that should have failed, but somehow succeeded. Students whispered about the impossible team, the 6 species that had survived what was designed to tear them apart. David spent most of the recovery time checking on his crew. That was how he thought of them now, not as strangers thrown together by circumstance, but as his crew, his responsibility. Nella was struggling with reintegration into her hive. Her sisters sensed the change in her, the individual thinking she had developed while isolated. They were trying to smooth it away to make her collective again. David found her in the Ravathi quarters, clicking softly to herself in distress. "They want to erase what I learned," she said when she saw him. "They say individual thought is damage that must be repaired." David sat carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "What do you want?" The question seemed to surprise her. Wants were individual concepts. The hive had needs, not wants. "I do not know," she admitted. "But I know I do not wish to forget. On the ship, when you brought me food during the crisis, you said my name. Not Ravathi or Hive Drone. My name. No one has done that before." "You matter, Nella," David said simply, "not as part of a collective. As yourself." Taurus was easier to find, but harder to talk to. The massive Coulter was in the training yard beating a practice dummy into scrap metal. David watched for a while before speaking. "You saved us all," he said. "That hull repair you did while the ship was failing. No one else could have done that." Taurus stopped mid-swing. "I did my part. Nothing more." "You did more than your part," David said. "And you know it. When Kiev got trapped in that flooded section, you were the one who broke through the sealed door. You did not have to do that. You could have let them die." "I should have," Taurus admitted, not looking at David. "By Kultor logic, the weak should not survive. But you said we survived together, and I found myself believing you." He turned finally, his scarred face unreadable. "My people would say you have made me soft. Made me weak." "Your people would be wrong," David said. "Caring about others does not make you weak. It makes you part of something bigger than yourself." The days passed, and the crew found themselves drawn together despite having no official reason to gather. They met in the observation deck, watching the stars and talking about things that had nothing to do with species or hierarchy. They were becoming something new, something that had no name in any of their languages. Then Instructor Call summoned them. "I have good news and bad news," he said when they assembled. "The good news is that your mission was successful beyond all expectations. You have proven that cross-species crews can function at the highest level." He paused, his expression grave. "The bad news is that you are being deployed immediately on a real mission." The room went silent. Nella clicked nervously. Shen's lights dimmed to worried blue. "There is a situation developing at the edge of Coalition space," Kyle continued. "A faction calling themselves the Purity Front has seized a mining station. They oppose integration, believing species should remain separate and pure. They have hostages," Riven growled softly. "Why send us? We are students, not soldiers." "Because you are the perfect counter to their ideology," Call said. "They claim that mixed species cooperation is impossible, that each race should stay with its own kind. You six prove them wrong just by existing together. Command wants to send that message." David felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "They want to use us as symbols. They want to use you as soldiers," Kyle corrected. "But yes, there is a symbolic element. The Purity Front chose that station specifically because it was one of the first true integration projects, workers from a dozen species living and working together. The Front sees it as an abomination." He pulled up a holographic display showing the station. "The hostages are in the central habitat. The Front has sealed all access points and threatened to vent the atmosphere if anyone approaches. They have given the Coalition 48 hours to abandon all integration initiatives, or they start executing hostages." Taurus studied the display. "This is a trap. They want us to come. They want to prove that mixed crews fail under pressure." "Probably," Kale agreed. "But those hostages are real, and you six are the best chance they have." David looked at his crew. Nella was still struggling with individual versus collective thought. Taurus was questioning everything his culture taught him about strength. Shen was learning to value beings that were not purely intellectual. Kiv was adapting to working with air breathers. Riven was discovering what it meant to be part of a pack. They were all works in progress, learning to be something their species had never been before. "We will do it," David said, "but we do it our way. No grand gestures. No symbols. We go in, we get the hostages out, we come home." Call smiled slightly. "That is what I hoped you would say. You deploy in 6 hours. Use that time wisely." The crew gathered in the common area of their temporary quarters. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Riven broke the silence. "I am afraid," the young Sherrick admitted. "Sherrick, do not speak of fear. We are taught to suppress it, to show only strength. But I am afraid of failing you all." Nella clicked in surprise. "You speak of fear as if it is weakness. But acknowledging fear is brave. The Lamari have a saying, Shen pulsed. Fear without action is cowardice. Fear with action is courage. You will act despite fear. That is the definition of courage. Taurus shifted his massive bulk. When I fought in my first real battle, I was terrified. I thought the fear would break me. Instead, it kept me sharp. It kept me alive. Kiv rippled in their suit, and the translator struggled with the aquatic being's words. My people say the ocean teaches patience. But patience without courage is just hiding. We dive into deep water afraid and we surface stronger. David listened to them all and felt something tight in his chest loosen. Humans have survived everything the universe threw at us not because we were fearless, but because we were afraid and kept going anyway. And we did it together, taking care of each other even when it would have been easier to only care for ourselves. He looked at each of them in turn. You are my crew. More than that, you are my pack. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Together. Riven repeated, the word a promise. The next morning, they boarded a fast assault craft and headed toward the captured station. The plan was simple in theory. Infiltrate through a maintenance airlock, move through the station's service corridors, reach the hostages, and extract them before the Purity Front could react. In practice, nothing was simple. The station was a maze of corridors and compartments, designed for multiple species with different environmental needs. What was a main passage for one species was a narrow crawl space for another. The Purity Front had sealed the obvious routes and was monitoring the main passages. David coordinated the team, using each member's abilities in ways they had never considered before. Nella's multitasking let her monitor 6 different routes simultaneously, while the others moved. Shen calculated optimal paths based on patrol patterns and sensor coverage. Kiv accessed flooded sections that the front thought were impassable. Taurus carried equipment through areas too heavy laden for others. Riven scouted ahead, its predator senses detecting ambushes before they sprung, and David tied it all together, remembering each person's needs, limitations, and strengths. He was not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest, but he knew his crew, and that knowledge was its own kind of power. They reached the hostage area without triggering any alarms. Through a viewport, they could see the prisoners, dozens of beings from multiple species huddled together in fear. Guards from the Purity Front patrolled the perimeter, all from the same species, all wearing uniforms that proclaimed their belief in segregation. There are too many, Taurus whispered. We cannot fight them all. We do not need to fight them all, David said. We just need to get the hostages out while they are distracted. He outlined the plan quickly. It was risky, requiring each of them to work in conditions completely unsuited to their biology. Taurus would need to be delicate with computer systems. Nella would need to work alone, isolated from any support. Shen would need to make physical actions, not just calculations. Kiv would need to leave the safety of their suit temporarily. Riven would need to show restraint instead of violence, and David would need to trust them all completely. This is insane, Shen pulsed. You are asking us to do things we are not designed for. I am asking you to trust each other the way I trust you, David said. We are stronger together than we are separately, not because we are the same, but because we are different. One by one they agreed, and as they moved into position, each of them understood what David had known from the beginning. What humans did best was not fighting or thinking or surviving. What humans did best was bringing others together and refusing to let them fall apart. They built packs from nothing, families from strangers, hope from despair. The rescue operation began, and 6 beings who should have been enemies worked as one to save lives they did not know, because that was what packs did. And they were a pack now, bound not by species but by something stronger. The plan worked perfectly for exactly 4 minutes. Taurus managed to access the environmental controls despite his massive hands being designed for crushing, not typing. Nella coordinated 3 separate distraction protocols while fighting the panic of working alone. Kiv slipped through maintenance ducts that would have been impossible for anyone still in a mobility suit. Shen calculated guard rotation patterns with perfect precision. Riven and David were moving toward the hostage-holding area when everything fell apart. A guard spotted them. Not through any failure on their part, just bad luck and worse timing. The alarm sounded before Riven could silence the guard, and suddenly the entire station knew they were there. The Purity Front response was immediate and overwhelming. Blast doors slammed shut, cutting the crew off from each other. Armed guards flooded the corridors. And in the hostage area, the front commander activated the atmosphere venting protocols. They had 30 seconds before everyone in that room suffocated. David's mind raced through options and discarded them all. Too far to reach the manual override. Too many guards between them and the hostages. No time for clever plans or careful coordination. Riven, he said quietly, I need you to be what you were born to be. The young Sharrock understood immediately. All the careful control, all the learned restraint, all the effort to be more than a mindless predator fell away. Riven dropped to all fours and moved with a speed and violence that was pure instinct. The guards never had a chance. Riven tore through them like they were paper, claws and teeth finding targets with savage precision. It was not elegant or strategic. It was raw primal fury channeled with purpose. This was what Sharrock were before civilization tried to tame them. This was the apex predator that had hunted across star systems. David ran behind Riven, trusting the Sharrock to clear the path. He reached the environmental controls and slammed his hand on the emergency stop. The venting protocols halted with 3 seconds remaining. The hostages were saved. But now David and Riven were trapped in a room with an entire station of hostile forces converging on their position. Riven stood over the unconscious guards, breathing hard, blood on its claws. Its eyes were wild, struggling between instinct and conscious thought. David, it rasped, I cannot hold back much longer. There are so many of them. I will kill to protect you. I know, David said. He activated his communicator.
Nella status?
Static. Then Nella's voice, strained but functional. I have restored communications. Taurus is fighting through to your position, but there are too many guards. Shen and Kiev are with the secondary hostage group but are pinned down. We are failing, David. David looked at the terrified hostages, at Riven barely maintaining control, at the sealed doors that would soon burst open with armed enemies. They were out of options, out of time. He did what humans always did when there were no good choices left. He made a new choice. Everyone listen, he said into the communicator, setting it to broadcast on all channels. My name is David Reed. I am human. I am a student at Academy Station Omega 7, and I am here with my crew to save people I have never met because that is what my species does. We do not abandon people. We do not let innocents die. We do not accept that there is no solution. He looked at the Purity Front guards who were starting to wake up. You believe that species should stay separate. You believe that mixing us makes us weak. But I am standing here with a Sharrock, a Ravathi, a Kultor, a Limery, and an aquatic being whose species name I still cannot pronounce correctly. And together we are stronger than any pure species group could ever be. The doors burst open, but instead of guards it was Taurus, having literally torn through the barriers with his bare hands. The massive Kultor was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but he stood between David and the approaching enemy forces. You talk too much, human, Taurus rumbled, but you are not wrong. Nella's voice crackled over the communicator. I have accessed the station's communication array. Your speech is being broadcast to the entire Coalition fleet waiting outside. They can hear everything. Shen added their input, lights pulsing rapidly. The Purity Front commander is demanding your surrender. He says he will execute one hostage every minute until you submit. David felt the weight of every decision he had made leading to this moment. He thought about Instructor Call sealing that room months ago, forcing a human and a Sharrock to sit together. He thought about the choices that had brought 6 impossible beings together into something that resembled a family. Tell the commander I want to speak with him directly, David said, face to face. Just him and me, Riven snarled. That is suicide. That is strategy, David said. Trust me. The Purity Front commander agreed, probably thinking it was a chance to make an example of the human. They met in the central plaza of the station's habitat ring, surrounded by guards on one side and hostages on the other. The commander was from a species David did not recognize, but his contempt was universal. You are the human who thinks he can change the galaxy with friendship and cooperation. I am the human who already has, David said. My crew proves that your ideology is based on fear, not fact. Your crew is an abomination, the commander spat. Each of you has betrayed your species by mixing with others. You have diluted what makes you strong. No, David said calmly. We have amplified what makes us strong. Taurus is stronger because he fights for others, not just himself. Nella thinks clearer because she learned to think as an individual. Riven is braver because it chose compassion over violence. Shen is wiser because they learned to value more than just intellect. Kiv is more adaptable because they worked with air breathers, and I am better because they all taught me their strengths. He stepped closer to the commander, deliberately putting himself at risk. You are afraid. Afraid that if species mix, you will lose your identity. But identity is not about staying separate. It is about knowing who you are while standing beside people who are different. The commander raised his weapon. Pretty words. But words do not stop plasma bolts. Riven tensed, ready to leap between David and the weapon. But David raised a hand, stopping the Sharrock with a gesture. You are right, David said. Words alone mean nothing. But actions do. And my crew has already proven through action what you deny through fear. He turned to address everyone in the plaza, knowing his words were being broadcast to the fleet. The Purity Front believes that species should fear each other, should stay isolated, should trust only their own kind. But fear is not strength. Isolation is not power, and trust only in your own kind means you face the universe alone. He gestured to his crew, assembled now despite the odds. We face the universe together. And that makes all the difference. The commander fired, but Riven was faster. The young Sharrock moved with impossible speed, taking the blast meant for David. Riven hit the ground hard, the shot having burned through armor and fur. For one terrible moment, time stopped. Then David was beside Riven, hands already working to stabilize the wound. Nella rushed forward with medical supplies. Taurus placed himself between them and the commander's weapon. Shen calculated the injury severity and began directing treatment. Kiv's tentacles extended from their suit, helping to seal the wound. They worked together with desperate efficiency, ignoring the guards, ignoring the weapons pointed at them, ignoring everything except saving their packmate. The commander watched in disbelief. You would risk your lives for a predator? For a being not even your species? David looked up, tears streaming down his face but hands steady as he worked. I would risk my life for my friend. That is what you will never understand. Species does not matter. DNA does not matter. What matters is that when Riven was rejected by its own kind, I chose to sit beside it anyway. And that choice changed both of us. The Coalition Fleet Commander's voice suddenly boomed through every speaker on the station. This is Fleet Commander Harris. Stand down immediately or be fired upon. You have 10 seconds to surrender. The Purity Front guards looked at their commander, uncertainty clear in their postures. Their ideology said they should fight to the death. But watching this mismatched crew desperately trying to save one of their own made that ideology seem hollow. One by one, they lowered their weapons. The commander stood alone, his cause crumbling around him. This changes nothing, he said bitterly. Species will always find reasons to hate each other. Maybe, David said, still working on Riven's wound. But they will also find reasons to love each other. And love is stronger than hate because it builds instead of destroying. Riven stirred, eyes opening. Did we win? The Sharrock rasped. We survived, David said, relief flooding through him. That is enough. The Coalition forces secured the station within the hour. The hostages were freed. The Purity Front members were taken into custody, and 6 students from different worlds sat together in a medical bay, exhausted and wounded but alive. Instructor Call arrived as they were being treated. He looked at them for a long moment, then smiled with genuine pride. The entire galaxy watched what happened here today. Fleet Command is already implementing new protocols for cross-species tactical units. They are calling them integration teams. He paused. You will be offered positions as instructors, teaching other species how to work together the way you have. This crew will become the model for the future of the Coalition military. Nella clicked softly. We are just students. We barely know what we are doing. That is exactly why you are qualified, Call said. You learned by doing, by trusting, by caring about each other despite every reason not to. That cannot be taught from a manual. It has to be experienced. Months later, David and Riven stood together watching a new class of mixed species teams begin their training. The students looked nervous, uncertain, divided by species and culture, just like they had been in the beginning. Riven watched a young Koltor sit hesitantly next to a Limari. Do you think they will succeed? Some will, David said. Some will fail. But the ones who succeed will change the galaxy. He looked at his friend, his partner, his packmate. You know what the other Sharrock call you now? What? The predator who chose his pack. It is a title of honor among your people. Young Sharrock are starting to question the old ways because of you. Riven's ears perked forward. Because I sat beside a human who did not fear me. Because Instructor Call sealed that room and gave us no choice but to prove the galaxy wrong, David said. He knew exactly what would happen. He gave a lonely predator and a stubborn human a chance to show that cooperation is not weakness. He smiled, and we did. Below them, the new students were beginning their first exercise, species mixing that would have been unthinkable a year ago, partnerships forming across lines that had once seemed absolute. The future of the galaxy was being written in that training hall, and it was being written by those willing to sit beside someone different and call them friend. Riven looked at David, and in that look was everything they had built together. Trust, loyalty,